All right, I'm Chelsea McDougall here with James Quirk. He's the Latin American correspondent for Labels and Labeling magazine. James has been covering the Mexican market for a very long time, and he's been here working really hard at this show, covering Labelexpo Mexico 2025. James, what would you say are the key trends that you're seeing on the show floor this year?
Well, it's been a great show, I think. The feedback has been very positive. It's a super interesting market. Everyone's very optimistic about it. There's certain caution, but sort of basically since the pandemic, obviously there was a huge nearshoring trend which drove great growth in exports to the US and also foreign investment. Because of the uncertainty around that, there's been a bit of caution, but because it seems that growth locally, internal consumption is very, very strong, most people are saying that the converters are still investing. They're buying ever more complex machinery for added value labels. There are certain end user markets that are growing very strongly that require higher end embellishments, such as the tequila market and even the growing wine market in the north of Mexico, which is being sold into the US. So it's been a fascinating show, and generally the feedback's been super positive. I think in terms of trends, what's very interesting is that the technology that's been on display this week has been very advanced. Interesting that, just as an example, AB Graphic, here have their flagship machine, the Digicon Series 3, not a kind of sort of lower cost machine for this market, and they're selling them, Cartes also showing very high-end embellishment equipment and very excited about this market. So it's been a really interesting mixture of high-end technology and I think particularly for those kind of advanced embellishments, that seems to be a key trend, I think.
Yeah, particularly those tequila bottles that we talked about. The other thing that I'm seeing and hearing a lot about is the tariff news. I think it came while we were here at Label Expo. A lot of people are talking about it, but kind of an interesting perspective that you and I were discussing a little bit before. Explain to me what you're hearing or what you heard from a lot of converters and suppliers on the floor this week.
It's been super interesting because everyone's been very, it's been front of mind, obviously the news this week, but the announcement was just yesterday that Mexico seems to have escaped Donald Trump's wrath, and so there aren't, tariffs being put on Mexico. But even despite, there's still uncertainty because obviously things can change. No one knows exactly what's going on. But the important message, I think, has been that despite that uncertainty, despite the fact that that huge export market to the US, may or may not be affected, people still remain very optimistic, and I think that's testament to the growth of the market internally. Converters are saying that if they're going to end up exporting less, if that does happen, they're not especially worried about it. There's enough growth here in Mexico that would compensate. And also we're noticing that a lot of the suppliers that have been here this week are really increasing their presence here. There's a number of suppliers that are opening new offices, lots of companies that have been appointing distributors, trying to get closer to the market. There'll be more of that in the review of the show in the next issue of Labels and Labeling. But clearly a market that is very, very dynamic. It's a kind of unique market because it's big internal consumption, a country of 130 million people that borders the largest consumer market in the world, and so it's kind of incomparable. There aren't really it's quite a unique place in that context. So generally, I think there's just been a lot of optimism. I think people are very excited. A lot of people have said to me that they think the show will grow even bigger in another 2 years' time. It's already twice the size in square meters than it was 2 years ago when we were in Mexico City. That in itself shows the excitement in the market. So yeah, I think it's been a super interesting show, and I think it's an exciting time for the Mexican label industry.
Yeah, nail on the head. I think a lot of the other things people were talking about is the show is bigger than we were in Mexico City and so much more equipment than we had in Mexico City.
Yeah, that's been very interesting. Double the size in square meterage. The exhibitor numbers have gone up from roughly 135. It's now like 210 or 15 or something like that. And so, yes, bigger booths, much more machinery than there was on display 2 years ago, and a real mixture of machinery. And as I say, a lot of very high-end stuff. A lot of the kind of big world-class brands are here with their flagship machines, their top-end machines, which, maybe a few years ago might not have been the case. They might have been looking at the kind of slightly lower-cost models. But I think there's at the top end of the Mexican label market, there are a lot of converters who are installing world-class machinery. Often they're serving the US market, but not always. The internal market, as I said, is growing a lot. Certain end user sectors like tequila are booming. And so it's been a real interesting mixture. A lot of digital, a lot of high-end embellishment. We have a big increase in presence from Chinese manufacturers. A lot of them are partnering with local distributors, and they're very excited about this market as well. So I think, all in all, it's been very, very positive.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I noticed, maybe you did as well, that it wasn't just the Mexican label converters that came here. I saw people from Guatemala, Ecuador, El Salvador. It really kind of drew from the entire region.
Absolutely, yeah. I've heard the same. I think Central America clearly. The majority, I guess, would be Mexican converters, but there's clearly been a very strong presence from Central America, as we would hope, as you would expect. But also, Colombia, Ecuador. I mean, I've seen converters from Peru, and then even from the Southern Cone, from Argentina, from Chile, and you wouldn't really expect that quite so much. It's a 10-hour flight from Buenos Aires to Mexico City, so it's a long way, and yet there've been good numbers from down in the south of South America as well. And I think that shows that. For many years, obviously, Labelexpo was running a label summit in Mexico on a sort of every other year, and then took the decision to bring a machinery show here for the first time 2 years ago. That decision has been massively vindicated, and I think that we'll see in another couple of years, it's quite possible that you'll get an even greater presence from the wider region as converters begin to regard this show really as not just a Mexican show, but a Latin American show, and I think it'll go from strength to strength.
Well said. Well, we should save some for the review in Labels and Labeling. We can't give away all our secrets and everything we learned just yet. But read James, myself, and Stella's story in issue 2 of Labels and Labeling.